Hi everyone. Hi. My name is Matthew Edwards. Is the volume okay? Great. Give you some context to who I am. I was one of the first conscientious objectors from the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I refused deployment to Afghanistan and I told them that I wasn't going to go to Iraq. They locked me in a dungeon for 6 months. They beat me, they tortured me, and they broke my hip. They finally kicked me out. Since that time, I've spent the last almost 10 years, 8 years, working with whatever community I find myself in, typically around issues of anti-militarism, but over the past few years, it's been around anti-police brutality work as well as community empowerment work. So it's a pleasure to be here. Hi again. I want to speak for a moment about the facts of our current movement. I hate to say it, but it's actually a violent movement. Let me explain why. There's racism in our movement. There's a lot of racism in our movement. I'd just like to have everyone look around for a moment at who's next to you, behind you, in front of you. Right? Okay, I'm going to leave that unsaid. There's some classism in our movement. There really is. I don't know if you've been down to the Occupy encampments, any of the Occupy encampments. You can tell that there's difference in class, and I think it's fair to say that out loud. There's homophobia. The fact that there are safe spaces that have been fought for prove that. And there's patriarchy. Lots of it. And I think it's fair to voice that too. Now those are all extremely violent structural forms. And those forms are wrapped around our movement like a cancer. So to say that we have a non-violent movement is false. Our movement has some violence in it. It's a little bit higher than the surface. It's hard to see, but it's there. Our movement's also privileged. Sometimes that privilege has to come from experience. Maybe you've been around for a while, you know everybody, so you kind of get put at the front in terms of stack. Maybe you start a committee and end up leading it. The hierarchy of information is a dangerous violent form. So I'd like us all just to pause for a moment and just reflect. This movement has some deep elements of violence. Now, we come to the discussion of tactics. I agree that nonviolence can be a way of life. And I would ask that you keep your way of life to yourself and let me live my life how I want to live it. And I will do the same for you. I'd like to turn to our collective memories here. I'm going to talk about Oscar Grant. I'm going to talk about the Oakland General Assembly. And I'm going to talk about the night after the first eviction, when we saw that street fight on the news before the news feed was cut. Who here participated in any of the riots in the Oscar Grant movement? There were 4 of them. Anybody? Okay. So I only asked because I don't want to speak to a group of people who already know. But let me say, a week after the murder of Oscar Grant, nothing had been done. There had been rallies, there had been press releases, but nothing structurally had been done. And then, people who were not in this room went out into the streets and they smashed shit. And they set some stuff on fire. And they fought the cops. And 100 people got arrested. All but 2 got charges put on them. And those charges were plead out. But over the course of almost 2 years, there were 3 other riots. The cop who killed Oscar Grant served a little bit of jail time. He would have served no jail time had people not gone out into the streets and demanded vengeance. It was violence, and I'm actually okay with that. Second point. During the General Assembly, there was a disruptive individual. I'm going to leave him nameless. But over the course of 3 nights, There was a steady progression. He was de-escalated each time. He'd come, maybe suffering from some sort of mental situation, maybe he was on drugs, alcohol, I didn't stop to ask him, but he was intense, he was aggressive, and he was calmed down using non-violent tactics. It was great. And then he came back the next night, and again, he was talked down. And then on the third night, he pulled a knife, and he started to aggress towards people. And the response was someone grabbed a 2x4 and hit him on the back of the head. He got knocked out. He was pulled from the camp. Medics checked him to make sure he was alive. He was, and that was the end of it. He didn't come back. He wasn't welcome there anymore. Now, I wonder, in our nonviolent movement, if someone hadn't gotten up and smacked him on the back of the head, would the cops have been called? I want to think that actually that probably would have happened. And then this poor guy would have been thrown into the violent penitentiary system, maybe beaten by police. At the very least, he would have been, once again, thrown into this machine, this violent machine. And instead, people took it upon themselves to use a little bit of violence to end a situation that needed to be ended. And I applaud that. And finally, the reason why people were able to reoccupy the second time is because they fought the police. Not with guns, not with firebombs, with their bodies, and sometimes rocks. And do you know what? Those images were spectacular. Not because they were super cool violent images, but because it showed people resisting. Resisting in a way that made sense, and resisting in a way that people could understand. So the plaza was reoccupied, and it lasted until it was, again, destroyed by the cops. So I'd just like to say, one, actually look at the situation. There are so many different forms of structural violence that we need to confront, and we are arguing about tactics that have been proven time and time again to actually get some results. Thank you.